Uh, okay. Thanks everyone for joining us on KRTD chat today. Here with us again, we have Sabs from the Sabs podcast from the FHL network. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. So we had you on last time. We talked a little bit about Massachusetts politics and all that stuff. But this time I wanted to focus a little bit more on direct action versus electoral politics, as well as I would even go as far as to, I'm not a huge fan of federal electoral politics. I'm sure we can agree on that. So I want to see if we could maybe even, the other thing I want to bring up is local electoral politics versus federal. Is that different? Is that more of the same? So, for example, you're in, I don't know if you want to disclose what town you're in Massachusetts. You're in Boston, right?
In the Boston area.
So you're in the Boston area. Let's say you live in Boston town, for argument's sake. So you have a local mayor's election, which affects 300 people in Boston town. How do you think that's more important than the presidential election because it affects you more directly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I can give a more recent example. When I moved to Boston at that time, Mayor Menino was mayor of Boston. He had been mayor for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and he decided to step down. And then Marty Walsh won that mayor race. When Marty Walsh came in, he did make changes. One of the changes that he made was with the public transportation system, which
Okay.
is in great need in great need of change. It's not a good system here, right? And it's the oldest public transportation system in the country. So he actually proposed the idea that the T, which is what we call it here, stay open later. So for those who don't know, our public transportation system does not run 24 hours like it does in New York City. I think the last call is like at 12:45 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are someone that works third shift, you're kind of screwed in reference to public transportation. You might be able to take it, you know, to work, but you may not be able to take it home from work. So that means if you don't have a car, you may have to take a cab, etc. Another thing that would happen is that for those of us that would go out to the bars and nightclubs on the weekend, we were kind of faced with no way to get home if you stayed until closing time. Last calls at 1 o'clock in the morning, they close at 2 most places. So you're trying to take a cab after you would leave the bar, and most of the cab drivers do not stop for you. Most of them are already full. We don't have a lot of cab drivers here like you have in New York City.
Yeah.
So what would happen is that I'll never forget this. People used to actually stop, like my friend, when she was driving, she would be sitting at a stoplight and ask her if she could take them home. So that's it's a problem with the public transit. So he proposed this idea to keep it open later, and he said the way this is going to pass is you got to vote with your feet. That weekend, as many people as possible as we could came out and said, let's ride the T home. When we leave the bar tonight, we leave the club tonight, we have to vote with our feet. We did really well. Unfortunately, some of the people above him said, no, no, we can't do that. We're just not going to keep it open later. And so this has been a big problem here. That was one of the things that he really tried to do, but he wasn't able to accomplish, but not no fault of his own. But his main goal when he came in was the housing issue, which is a big problem. And he also wanted to address the fact that there are a lot of young people that live in Boston because of all the colleges. And he told the media in his address that a lot of young people after they graduate from college here are leaving this city, not because they don't want to live here, but because the city is not really, I guess, built for young adults. What do I mean by that? I mean that it's not like a New York City. It's not like a LA. Young people want to go out, they want to have a good time. You have
Mhm.
places that are closing really early. And when Mayor Menino was mayor, he actually proposed the idea to start closing the bars at midnight. So he wanted to make it more of a family city. Marty Walsh wanted to make it more of a city for young people. And so he implemented things. He implemented the Donna Summer like roller skating event. Donna Summer is from here. So he added events and more festivals and things that younger people can enjoy to attract young people to come into the city and stay here and to prevent young people from leaving Boston and going to those cities like New York or like Los Angeles for work. So when I look at local politics, I see it as though you have a better shot of creating change and implementing change than you do when you run for a federal position.
Absolutely. Oh, I don't want to give a shout out. Oz is in the chat. Hey, Oz.
Hi, Oz.
Okay, so definitely. So, would you agree as it gets as you get up from town council to mayor, and then you finally get to the state house to state rep? As you get, the more you get up, the less power you have, and the less ability you have to make change, and the less directly it affects you.
Absolutely. I try to encourage people to run for city council.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for some people, they just don't look at that as like a big position. They don't feel like it's a position that has a lot of power, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, city councilors still have a regular job, and city council is something that they do on the side. It's not like when you become mayor. So a lot of people don't want to do it because of that, but city council controls the budget. So some of these things that we complain about, public transportation, poor public transportation, not having enough, subway stops in the area,
So
not
this
having enough.
is sorry to cut you off. This is where you can be a little bit more direct action. You can be like, okay, we're going to run 7 people for city council, and these 7 people want to address the public transportation issue. And then
Yep.
we're going to run a guy for mayor who also wants to address the public transportation issue.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this is coalition building, and this is local politics, and this is, in a way, direct action because they're running directly for that issue.
Exactly. And I've known people personally that have run for city council. One friend of mine, who's also a colleague, ran for city council in Boston, and he did not win, but it was his first time running, very young. And that's another position that I think if you're a younger person, if you're like in your 20s or early 30s, it may be easier for you to get into that type of position than if you're going to run for mayor or governor or something like that. They usually want you to have a little bit more experience. And in fact, that's how Ayanna Presley got started.
Right.
She was Boston City Council for her district, and now she's in Congress. But you have to start somewhere, and I think City Council is a great way to start.
Absolutely. Now, I'm looking at the budget. You mentioned it looks like the salary of counselors is now increased to 103,500 a year in Boston. So maybe you could. It may not have been the case before the people, or is that not enough to live on in Boston?
Like that sounds like a lot. And like if I was still living in South Carolina, I would be like, hell yeah, that's a lot of money. You'll be living very well. But in Boston, that's not a lot, especially if you don't have roommates, if you're living by yourself. The main thing that holds a lot of people back here is rent. Rent is astronomically expensive. When I first moved here, I remembered you could get a 1 bedroom apartment in Alston neighborhood in Boston for like $900 a month. That is
Okay.
not the case today. So like your average 1 bedroom is over $2,000. Some are $3,000. It continues to go up. I think the pandemic paused that a little bit because
Sounds
people were
like
moving
Manhattan.
out. Huh?
Sounds like equivalent to Manhattan.
Yeah, and in fact, some places here are actually more expensive than apartments like in New York City.
Wow.
We don't have rent control and we don't have rent stability. So the landlords can increase the rent as much as they want. And I've had friends who have been kicked out of their apartments because the landlord has done that or because they sold the building to an investor and the
Hmm.
investor decided to jack the rent up and they just couldn't afford to live there anymore. And that means you have to come up with 3 months worth of rent to go find another apartment. That's a lot to come up with. I mean, that's like $5,000.
Oh, absolutely. That's expensive. So Yeah, I guess that is a part-time job in a place like that, unless you got 3 city council people rooming together.
Yeah, it does not go far here. The rent is going to hold you back, and then a lot of us have student loan debt, so student loans are going to hit you in the pocket. If you have a car, some people here don't. If you do have a car, you still have to pay for car insurance. You still have to pay your utilities, and then there's all the other things that go along with winter months in here. In Boston, there's things that you have to do here for winter season that you don't have to do in other places that I've lived in. That costs money as well, snow removal, all those kinds of things. And then if you just want to have a life, like
Hmm.
just doing things like going out to dinner with your friends or actually going somewhere on vacation and not just taking a week off to sit at home. I know people that do that too. So there's
Hmm.
all that that goes along with it as well. But the biggest thing that holds people back here, even if you are making that amount, is the rent and student loan debt.
So I'm assuming a lot of people, when they first move out of their parents' house, are going to have roommates when you live in
Oh
Boston,
yes. Oh
if
yes.
unless they leave Boston.
Oh yes. And I don't know one person here that does not have a roommate. Most people I know have multiple roommates, and that's like not counting people that have families. So if you're married and you have kids and you're getting that income, then you have to stretch it even further.
Definitely, us newscasters who make millions of dollars a year should be fine, right?
I heard someone say something one time. They were like, Sabby has a studio. I'm like, studio? This is a room in my house. I don't have a studio.
You
Like,
wish you had a studio.
I can't afford to have a studio. And then people are moving further and further out of Boston. So even if you go like 30 miles, 40 miles outside the city, some of those apartment complexes still have the same price rent as it does in the city.
And there's the other. It'll also likely prevent people from running for city council too, because you have to live within the city limits.
Yep.
I'm assuming to be in the city council.
Yeah. And then you still have to, if you're working a full time job, you still have to have that time to go to city council meetings, to go to town halls. So it takes up a lot of your time.
Absolutely. So I want to address the chat here. So whatever man, that's a great name, says local elections have more power per vote than national.
Yep.
See, what do you think about that?
It's true because also like when you're voting for people for city council and for mayor, oftentimes you may know those people
Hmm.
because they live in your district. So for example, I don't know Elizabeth Warren.
No.
Like I've never met her. I've never even seen her here. And she's not in my district. She's never lived in my district. And so I think you develop more of a personal relationship with them and you see them actually involved in the community. So that makes a difference, I think.
Absolutely. I have to silence my phone. um. Anyway, yeah, absolutely. Um. I have not. Have and do you show up for local races? I'm curious.
Yes.
Personal. Okay.
Yes. So when my friend I was telling you about when he ran for city council, I was there for that. When Ayanna Presley was running, again, she at that time I lived in her district. So I heard about her through Tito Jackson, not the singer. There's a Tito Jackson that lives here. That is a local politician.
Sure.
So you saw them in the community. You saw them if you have kids, your kids may have gone to school with like Anna Presley's daughter. So you know them well. And I think that creates a level of community that I think that we just do not get from political officials that are in some of these federal positions. And I'll give you a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Crowley from New York. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that residents there said is that they never saw him there. The only time they would see him is when he was up for reelection. So you don't have that personal relationship with them anymore. And that happens with a lot of politicians that go to
No,
DC.
exactly. He has tremendous. He, like Elizabeth Warren, has tremendous name recognition,
Hmm.
but you never see them anywhere. Although I would argue that as much as I'm disappointed with Warren, I think her policies are a lot better than Joe Crowley.
Right. She tends to come out for things when she's up for elections.
Yes.
So there were a couple of strikes here going on at Stop and Shop, which is a grocery store chain here. She was out there with protesters protesting against that. I believe she was also involved in the protests with Market Basket, which is also a grocery store here as well. But that was election year for her. Like she was up for, like, I don't see her or hear from her
She can
now.
do it all. But here's the thing: it shouldn't matter if it's election year or not, or if the event is big enough. Like, I get it. She came up through Occupy Wall Street. That was a big event. Great. Good
Yep.
for you. But what about the other events that followed that were not as big? I have a feeling she wasn't at those.
No, she was not. In fact, she was not at the Medicare for All marches here. She didn't even talk about it. She was nowhere to be seen. Same thing for the rest of them, actually. Ed Markey. Ed Markey's another one. He has some good ideas. I have actually met him, and it was not on purpose. I was at a Thanksgiving Day event at a local school in Malden, Massachusetts, which is where he is from,
Yeah.
and we were giving out Thanksgiving meals to homeless people in Malden. He showed up to that event. I didn't know he was coming. Nobody else really knew he was coming, but he did show up, gave a speech, and asked like how he could help. But he's another one though. You don't really see him that much like in the community either.
Here's what I'm gonna guess. He probably shows up a little bit more than Warren does to
Right.
things,
Right.
but even still, it's probably not enough. And I get it. You're a senator. You have to do this and this. But maybe if you were to tell whoever, I'm assuming these people have people who manage their schedules for them and all that. Maybe you
Yep.
tell this person, hey, I want you to set aside 5 hours for the whole month, or 5 days in a month. Spread them out, and I want to find you to find me events to go to help people. They could do that.
And I've spoken to some of those people actually to tell them about like direct action events that we have here, and the response is usually the same. We'll let them know.
uh, I wonder if the message actually ever gets there. Here's the thing: you don't. Who are these people's staffers? Because the message might get up to a certain point, and then the person who they finally, it's like a game of telephone, except the
Mhm.
message will stay the same. It'll get up to the chief of staff, and the chief of staff will say, well, Ed Markey or Elizabeth Warren, whoever doesn't have time for this, I'm not even going to tell them.
Yeah, and they can also choose to go to the events that are going to give them more attention, that
Okay.
is going to have more press coverage. That's a big thing too. Same thing with media, you know, media appearances. Same thing. They'll choose to go to the shows that they know is going to give them a lot of media attention.
And here's the thing: it's the same thing. Let's say, for example, the Squad. The
Mhm.
Squad, as much as I'm pissed off with TYT did give them a lot of coverage while they were running for office.
Yep.
They have not been on there since, or any of the other shows at all since they won their election, pretty much ever. They don't go on any of those shows anymore.
No, but TYT is also a part of the corporate algorithm.
It doesn't matter for them; they still don't get their access.
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate, especially with someone like AOC. I think the first person that brought her on was Jimmy Dore,
It was
like
Jimmy
on the
Dore
left.
while he was at that network. Yeah.
Yep. So
I think
they
it was
don't.
while he was behind the paywall at TYT.
Yeah, and like they run from us now.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're approached at the Capitol by independent media people on the left, they run away. They ran away from Franco. Cori Bush was talking to Max Blumenthal, and her, I don't know if this was her bodyguard or whoever he was in the video, was just like, she's not going to take any more questions from you. So they don't really want to be seen with us right now. They have their positions. They're good.
They don't. Let me ask you a question. As much as you're not thrilled with Elizabeth Warren, if her press secretary reached out to you and said, can Elizabeth Warren do an interview on your show? What would your response be?
Oh, I would say yes, but I would not be it would not be a friendly interview.
Mhm.
Just
But
put
you
it.
would do it. You wouldn't deny her.
I would do it, but I would press her. I would press her on issues. I would press her. I would ask her questions like, why are you not around for these things? Like, why didn't you, where were you for the Medicare for All marches? Like, why, especially with student loan debt, like, how could you let them, like, snowball you like this? Like, why are you not fighting for these things that you said you were going to fight for? When I watch your debates, and I've seen both of them, both times that she ran, why are you not fighting for these things anymore? What is really going on?
Mm-hmm. That would be, of course, she'll never ask you to come on your show, but
No, 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 no. I
nobody who's
think
going to press her. I mean,
nope.
they even run away from if they won't. If Bernie Sanders won't let Kyle Kalinske interview him, there's no way they're going to let you anywhere near them. And that's the thing. If somebody like Kyle is too much for them to put
Mhm.
Bernie with, if that's too far, if that's somebody they're afraid is going to press him too much, nobody's getting anywhere near them who's going to actually press them.
Well, and then that's when I think, I don't know who's involved with production over there or not, but I think that's when I would have had to push back and say, well, we're not going to do the interview, because you don't get to come onto someone else's show and tell them who from that show can be present for your interview. That is
That's
absolutely ridiculous.
that's Crystal Kyle and Friends. That's the name of the podcast. Those are the
Mhm.
hosts of the podcast, and that's the show you just agreed to be on with those hosts.
And you have to wonder, why was he okay talking to Crystal? Because Crystal's been critical of him too.
Crystal's been critical of him too, but here's the difference between Crystal and Kyle. Crystal used to work for MSNBC, and I would say she toes the line more than Kyle does. I mean, it's a slight difference, but she
Mhm.
does more than Kyle. Kyle is more willing to. Kyle, for example, has called Bernie out more than Crystal has, and he's been more specific on it when he does. Of course, he tries to toe the line also and tries to keep that middle ground audience, but some of the things he said, they might be worried. What if he says that to Bernie while he's on the interview? What if he presses him on this issue? What if he brings up, because I think Kyle's one of the ones who started talking about senators can actually block legislation. What if he
Yep.
asked Bernie about that on this camera? What if Kyle said to Bernie, why aren't you blocking legislation to try to force some votes on some stuff?
Yep.
You can't have that.
Yeah, I think that I feel that Bernie could have went on. Why did he go on Breaking Points if he didn't want,
Exactly.
like, yeah, like, why didn't he go on that show? But my whole thing is that it's got to feel some kind of way, or make you feel some kind of way, knowing that you have advocated for this person for both of their elections. You have talked about them almost every day when they were campaigning for both of their elections and told everybody to go out and vote for them. This is why you shouldn't simp hard for politicians, because this is
Mm-hmm.
how they treat you in return. It's like, so you give a criticism, now all of a sudden they can't come on your show, they can't come on and talk to you. Like, this is just
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like, I
I
don't
want
think anybody else, like, I'm critical of Kyle, but I
Yeah,
don't think anybody else on the left promoted Bernie Sanders more than he did.
you're right. And that's how Bernie repays him. But I have a theory here. I don't have any evidence. I want to see what you think. This was a little bit after Kyle left the TYT network. I wonder. Bernie still has some connection with TYT. I wonder, did Cenk give Bernie a call and say, don't let Kyle talk to you? Who knows?
Could be. I mean, TYT is very, they took that $20 million. They have
Mm-hmm.
a large corporate investor, and I mean, they get all the big names in reference to politics. They got Nina Turner on there now, so that could have happened. That's a good point. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think
Plus,
about that.
Cenk was pretty pissed when Kyle said they were wrong on every issue on his show.
And I had a feeling that was going to happen, and I think that's what happens though when you try to play in the middle, because sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
have to take a side. And if you don't take a side, then it's like your audience is going to press you about it. And then you end up saying, okay, well, let me tell you how this person was wrong. Let me tell you how that person was wrong. And then you end up both sides disliking you. So
Exactly.
it just, I mean, I, I
Essentially.
think. I think sometimes people may bite their tongue because they're in business with that person or that group, that company with TYT. But you got to be real here. I remember sitting there listening to TYT lie to us about force the vote. And then they came back afterwards and then said, oh, by the way, I misspoke on that. I was wrong on that. Didn't matter then, because we had already passed it.
Mm-hmm. And the hilarious thing to me during that whole thing, I don't know if it's hilarious, but even but Jank had on Ryan Grimm. I don't know if you remember during the whole Force the Vote thing, and he asked him to explain to everybody how Kevin McCarthy would become Speaker if it happened. And Ryan's like, "Well, actually," and it's like you got the guy who's defending the squad all the time and who's your TYT contributor saying, "Well, no, that's actually not what would happen."
Yep. I don't think they expected that from him.
As bad as Ryan Grimm is, he's still well. If you press him directly on a question in an interview, he'll still tell you the truth. If you press him directly, he's not gonna. He'll try to defend the squad, but with numbers, he seems to tell the truth as much as he'll put a bunch of excuses around it if it's something for the squad, but he will tell the truth when it comes to numbers. And Jeng probably wasn't counting on that.
Right. At the end of the day, it's all a game. And it's like you have to either play their game, and it's a lot of people trying to go over to TYT. They want that notoriety, they want that that audience because they do have a large audience.
They do.
But you shouldn't have to sell out to increase your audience.
They shouldn't. And everybody forgets that Jank used to be in favor of Force the Vote.
Yep.
It was very brief. It was on his Twitter. If we go back, I'm sure somebody has screenshots somewhere. If I check around enough, somebody's probably got those screenshots. He was in favor of Force the Vote, and then Anna went on the air and called Jimmy Dore a bad faith actor. And instead of saying, you know what, this is a good idea, he just said, you know what, Anna, you're right.
Yep.
Are you kidding me? That was honestly that was their final downfall was when they didn't support Force the Vote. Because that was their opportunity to prove, yeah, we took the $20 million. Yeah, we did this. But you know what? We're still in favor of the right things, and we're going to fight for the right things regardless. And they didn't prove it. They just proved the exact opposite of that. Yeah,
well, they're following the money trail, and they are very, very wealthy.
Here's the thing. My thing on that was, if you got everybody on board with Force the Vote, they wouldn't have been able to ignore it. TYT was the missing piece of that puzzle. If you had Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kalinske and the Young Turks and the Majority Report and every faction of the left saying, I want you to force a vote, the squad's not going to be able to ignore you.
Exactly. You're 100% right. The fact that none of them came to that town hall, for me, was just very telling. Even one of them could have come, So for me, it told me where their loyalties lie.
And you have Mr. John Idarola, who has never said a single thing about Force the Vote or the fight or anything, and just wants to stay silent.
And may have been told to stay silent. For all we know.
But here's the thing. He could have left TYT after the summer, but because he was not involved in any of the fights, he could have left and he still would have had a following. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. His health insurance is directly tied to TYT.
That doesn't surprise me.
That's when we get into jobs and health insurance and why that's a bad idea.
Yeah, that I'm not surprised by that at all. Well, it's it keeps you tied to the job.
Yeah, and that's not just with media, that's with anything. But let's go ahead and so you guys, I'm not sure if you did it already. I think you did one of them. You have the general strike thing coming up.
Yeah, that's in November. We have talked about the October 15th general strike that some people know about it, some people don't. That is coming up. I think that unfortunately the word did not get out about that.
The general strike summit I was referring to, but yeah.
So that's coming up. I'm really excited about that. And the whole goal is to explain to people how we can do a general strike, to educate people about unions, educate people about worker co-ops, to educate people about mutual aid. Because even though we do talk about these things on our show, we've realized, I think, that we need a segment just specifically for that so people can focus on those things.
Definitely. It reminds me a little bit of the U.S. Solutions Summit in the fact that it's a few panel discussions.
Yeah. So That is one of the things that we do try to focus on, especially with FHL, is that we try to focus on, okay, we want to talk about the problems, but we also want to talk about possible solutions. And that was something that we haven't seen done by a lot of people in independent media on the left. They'll tell you about the problems, but they don't tell you how can we change this? How can we fix this? So I think at this point in this country, the pandemic has really revealed a lot. I think there
Mhm.
were always inequalities. I think many of us saw that and experienced that. But the pandemic really took the cover off. And now all of America sees it. And so at this point, I feel that the best way forward is for a general strike.
I 100% agree with that. The logistics of that would obviously be very difficult.
Mhm.
And I like the October 15th one, but I don't think anybody's going to be ready by October 15th, as much as I like that idea.
Right. We would have
October
had to
15th,
have like a lot of mutual aid built up.
October 15th, what's today? Like the 11th? That's 4 days from now.
Exactly.
We're not ready.
Exactly. One thing I have told people, because I know like a lot of us can't afford to leave our jobs, but one thing that I have been telling people is that we can withhold our consumerism. We can stop buying from Walmart. We can stop buying from Amazon, and if those are the only retailers that you can go to, because I know in some rural towns it's just Amazon and Walmart. What you could do if you have a Prime subscription to cancel your Prime subscription. Now that means you may not get your items within 2 days, but that's okay. We didn't always
That's it.
get things fast in this country
Or you know
before.
what? Go over to eBay. Give them your
Yeah.
business instead, because these are individual sellers who are
Mhm.
trying to make a living off of eBay.
Exactly. Because I'm just curious. I'm going to look this up one day. I'm curious how much money Amazon makes just off of the Prime subscriptions alone.
That's a good question.
It's like I think it's like $100 a year now. Didn't used to be that much. But I'm curious. I'm going to try to see if I can find those numbers.
Yeah, that's a good. That's a good. Um, 25 in 2021. I mean 2020 last year, $25.21 billion.
Well, there you go.
That
So
was just last year. Yeah.
yeah. So that's one of those things that we can do. In fact, when I first started using Amazon, I didn't have a Prime subscription. So,
Exactly. And I get some people get their subscription through Amazon, but you know what you can also do? You can go directly to the subscription places instead.
yes, absolutely. And some people will say that Amazon is the cheapest place for them to get their products. I've actually been doing a little bit of research, and that's not 100% true as of recent. If you look at the prices for a product on Amazon and then look at the price for that same product in the store, I've noticed that Amazon is not necessarily the cheapest place to go now.
It's not.
Um,
And sometimes it's just $1 or $2 difference, in which case
yep,
I think.
yep. And if we want to talk about in reference to the environment,
Mhm.
it's better for you to get that item at the store than to order it from Amazon. I've gotten things from Amazon before and it was like one item and they put it in this giant box with all this paper. And
It's
I'm just like,
ridiculous.
way to waste resources, right? Like it didn't need all this packaging.
No, exactly. Um, I think people can look at other stores. They can look at eBay. They can look at all different other
Mhm.
options.
Absolutely. There's other ways to go about getting these things, and that's also where mutual aid comes in. Because in reference to mutual aid, one of the things that you can do if you go to mutualaidhub.org, you'll be able to see mutual aid organizations all across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew there were some in Boston, but on that website, I was surprised there were some that I had never heard of before. And some of the requests that they have are they need someone to go pick up items for them. Sometimes it could just be grocery shopping. Some elderly people can't leave their house. Some people that are disabled can't leave their house to
Mm-hmm.
physically go to the grocery store and get their groceries. So that's something mutual aid wise that you can do. You can volunteer to grocery shop for someone so that they don't have to pay Instacart to do it because Instacart is rather expensive.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you can even do it in your like. I've seen people. There are people in my neighborhood who they'll go shopping for some of the elderly people
Hmm.
just within our own community. I know whatever. I don't want to give out a name. I know Wanda. She's lived in the community for 30 years. She can't really move that well. I want to go shopping for her. You can even do it within your own community. It doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be through an organization. It could just be you doing something nice.
Absolutely. And this is where it comes in with getting to know your neighbors. And so I gave this as like a homework assignment to my
Hmm.
audience. I said, I challenge everyone to get to know someone in their neighborhood that they don't know. And I say that because one of the things that Rome has talked about doing the tour for the poor is that some people are a little hesitant when you're like, hey, here's free food, free clothes. If they don't know you, they're kind of
Hmm.
like, okay, what's this all about? Is there a catch? Or they don't trust it because they don't know you. So try to get to know people first so that you can build up that trust with them and then ask, like, if they need help with things, what can you do? Up here in Massachusetts, the biggest thing that we have in the winter is snow removal. Some people cannot shovel snow, whether it's
Hmm.
because of a medical condition or because they're older, they may be elderly, and they just physically can't pick up a shovel. And shoveling snow it's heavy. I don't know if
Hmm.
you guys have ever done this before. It's heavy and it can tire you out easily. But that's something that you can do for people as well.
Absolutely, definitely. So, I want to get to Boston. Get back to Boston a little bit. Within Boston, do you have any particular issues that are important right now that are being fought for directly in Boston that are local Boston issues?
Oh my God. Where do I begin? Housing is the big one, and it's been a
Okay.
problem for a long time. Um, Gentrification is pretty rampant here. People have been pushed further and further outside of the city, and we got to get a handle on the housing issue. Boston needs to build more affordable housing units, not more condos. I'm so tired of seeing another condo building go up that the majority of people here cannot afford to live in. So we need more affordable housing units built, and they need to stay affordable and not sell it to an investor and have them jack the price up. So we need that. We need to have some, and Maryland actually has this in Baltimore. We need to have some type of housing incentive for teachers so that teachers can have to pay less rent if they're teaching and living in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
because it's, again, I told you the rent's just really expensive. Something for teachers. I think they have that in place for law enforcement. We need to have that in place for teachers as well. They are underpaid and they are underappreciated and
Mm-hmm.
just not treated the way that they should be in this, and not just in Boston, but in this country in general. Um, the other issue that I think is problematic is public transportation. Our
Okay.
public transportation system sucks. I'm
You want
just
to
going to
trade?
be honest. Huh?
You want to trade? I'll give you the New York. No, I'm just kidding.
It just, the fact of, you know, it doesn't run 24 hours. That's a problem for people that work third shift.
Okay.
It is not reliable. That's why I don't even take public transportation anymore because it's not reliable.
Would you
I don't
prefer
know.
something more closely aligned with what we have in New York?
Yeah, because when I lived in New York, this is the thing about the transit system in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that at some point the train was coming. It
Yes.
would be here. In Boston, especially when we get into winter, we may not even have snow yet, and the trains have difficulty running because the tracks, sometimes you get ice over the tracks. Chicago has prevented this issue because their tracks actually heat up during the winter, so their subway can continue to run and not have these
Well,
problems.
all of New
Um,
York is connected by buses and trains. No matter where
mhm,
you go, you can find a bus or a train. I can just look up. It might take me 3 hours, but I can find a way to get to the Bronx from Queens or from
mhm.
Queens to Brooklyn through bus or train.
We don't even have public transportation in some of the lower income neighborhoods like we should in Boston. If you go into Dorchester, why are there only like two T stops in Dorchester, which is the largest neighborhood in Boston, and the rest is done through bus lines? This is problematic. Same thing for Mattapan. Why are there so few stops, and yet Boston proper has several? So it means
Hmm.
that people who live in those lower income areas, they are having to take a more complex commute. They are having longer commutes. And it's really not fair. It's like saying that because you are lower income, you are going to have a difficult time getting to school, getting to work. I've talked to kids that live in Dorchester that have to take 3 buses and a train just to get to class. So it's discouraging and it takes more time out of your day. So public transportation has to be fixed here. It's come up every election, every race we've had here. They haven't got a handle on it. And also the maintenance with the public transportation. The trains here are incredibly old. They are outdated. They need to be updated.
Yeah.
That should have been done a long time ago. So that's a big issue as well. The third issue we have here is gentrification. It's a problem. Black and brown communities here are being gentrified every day, and people
Hmm.
are being pushed out of those neighborhoods because the landlords are increasing the rent because they know that the professionals who are moving into those neighborhoods will pay for it. And it's not
The,
just the black and brown neighborhoods because South Boston also has gone through gentrification, which was historically an Irish American neighborhood. You go to South Boston today, it is not a working class neighborhood. I know I lived there for a short time. It
yeah.
is very much they call it a yuppie area. There's juice bars on the corner, there's spin cycle places. It's very much changed. And you have to ask what is happening to the working class here in Boston. They are pushed further out to South Shore, North Shore, and they're having to make longer commutes to work as well.
Definitely. Our landlords are just as horrible in New York. My, I just want to tell a little. One of I know some people live in Manhattan. They have rent. They have some buildings. For the older people who've been living there for a certain amount of years, they were able to get rent control. They will not do anything to upgrade your apartments if you're in a rent control apartment. If you moved in there in the 1980s, your apartment is still going to look like it did in the 1980s. They will not do anything to
Mhm.
help you. The second that you die, they go into your apartment, they upgrade everything, and they rent it out for 5 times as much money.
Yeah, it's a problem. And like a lot of these larger cities get away with it. They get away
Hmm.
with it. And like I remember at one point when I was living in Cambridge, we didn't have heat. Like
Correct.
in the winter, and we contacted our landlord multiple times and said, heat's not working, heat's not working. It was always these excuses. I can't get over there because, I'm busy. I'll come by tomorrow. I take off from work to stay there to meet him, wouldn't show up.
It
Uh,
reminds me of the cable companies.
yeah, it just imagine like nobody should have to deal with that. I've had students have this issue as well. They're like, we don't have heat in our apartment. What do we do? Especially, and they try to do this a lot with international students because they assume they don't know the rules and the laws and regulations. Renters actually have more power here in Massachusetts compared to other states that I've lived in.
Hmm.
And when you have slumlords take advantage of people who are just trying to get by, just trying to make it, and turning off their heat or not getting their heat fixed in the winter, it's a tragedy and it needs to be fixed.
Definitely. So I want to go ahead and look at this. I think this is a question for you in regards to Boston. I want to bring this up on the screen here.
Is there a housing subsidy for renters? So they have low income housing here. Some people may refer to it as Section 8 housing, that kind of thing. The problem, though, that people often run into, number one, there's usually a wait list. So sometimes that wait list can be a year, sometimes 3 years, because they don't have enough housing for everybody.
Hmm.
This is a problem that we have in Boston that
Hmm.
is the opposite of housing issue in San Francisco. When I talked to Shahid Buttar, he said in San Francisco they actually do have enough homes for everybody. In Boston, they don't. We've had this problem for a while. And
Yeah.
so you have those options here, but it's not that easy to get into it. There's a wait list, and then you have to have a certain income. Anytime your income goes above that amount, well, then that puts you out of the criteria for that housing subsidies. Another problem is too, some of these units tend to be in areas where there just isn't public transportation. So now you have affordable housing, but you now have to, if you don't have a car, you got to walk like a mile to get to the closest bus stop, to get to another subway train, just to get you to work. So it's like people who are lower income and poor are being punished because they're lower income and poor. It's absolutely ridiculous. And considering that this is a city where public education began in this country. It is
Hmm.
one of the most highly educated cities in this country. There is no reason why we should have not fixed these things by now.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you about one of the guests you recently had on your show. Recently, you had Cynthia McKinney.
Mhm.
I'm a huge fan of Cynthia McKinney. I'm sure a lot of us here are. Um, what do you think? Looking back on her career, what do you think? What are your thoughts on her? I would say.
Wow. Cynthia McKinney to me is a voice that
Hmm.
needs to be heard by everyone in this country, regardless of what political party you are affiliated with, because she tells what happens on the Democrat side, the Republican side, and third party as well. Like she tells the full story.
Hmm.
And someone like her is considered a threat to DC.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
she is what the squad was supposed to be, and we see that they are not. They are hesitant to speak about some things. We can tell, like AOC in some interviews, I can tell that she's just giving us word salad. She seems very nervous. I can tell she's lying like half of the time. So she is what the squad was supposed to be, and I commend her for, coming forward and speaking out against these things. And as you can see, one of the things that she said was that she didn't want to, play their game. So the Democratic Party was like, "We want you out," and that's how it works. If you don't move the way that they want you to move, they're going to ask you to leave.
Well, we saw that on the Republican side a little bit with Justin Amash. He basically got thrown out of their
Yep.
party.
Yep. Yep.
Um, put this up on the screen for a minute. I'm not going to say just to put it up. Oh, here's an interesting one. Cynthia is what Bernie was supposed to be as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. I used to question, why did Bernie run under the Democratic Party? Why didn't he run through the Green Party? I know Green Party did reach out to him. So
Mhm.
again, it's just this idea that they are still trying to get us to vote within the Democratic Party. And this was one of the questions that I had earlier this year as well. Why are some of these, even like the independent commentators, why are they still trying to keep us in the Democratic Party? Like they will tell you, Democrats are corrupt, Republicans are corrupt, you got to vote for these progressive candidates. Okay, don't vote for the Democratic Party, but vote for this Democrat who is still going into the Democratic Party. So you have to ask that question, like, why are they still trying to keep us in the Democratic Party? They
Mhm.
come on every time and they tell you all the bad things about the established Dems, and the progressive Dems that go into the Democratic Party eventually become establishment Democrats. They're
Exactly.
not always going to be, they don't stay this way. Look at Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman is saying the same things that Elliot Ingalls said.
But him, he had to tell. When he was running for office, I really liked him. And then he got Barack Obama's endorsement. And he
Yep.
was so excited to get that endorsement, more so excited than he was to get Bernie Sanders' endorsement or Elizabeth Warren's endorsement or any of these, I would say, Democratic type progressives. He was more excited about Barack Obama's endorsement. Nobody else noticed that, I don't think. I don't know if you did.
Absolutely. There was that name recognition and, first African American president. It's like we have to ask ourselves why there is still this message being preached that we need to listen. Just as Democrats have been revealed that they have dark money, they're corrupt too. So again, like we have to stop playing this game that we continue to lose.
Absolutely. Um, here's one. The Dem Party is like a business, and they need customers. If we're funneled that direction like lemmings. So many people make mad cash regardless of who gets elected.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things Cynthia McKinney brought up too about face change, that we
Mm-hmm.
fall for face change instead of regime change. And it's true because every election they manage to convince us that the problem is not so much the party itself. The problem was the person who was in that position before them. So we need to put in a new person that is going to fix those things. And every time that new person gets in, they do the same thing the people that came before them did. So it's all a game. And at the end of the day, even the ones that tell you that they're not there to be careerists, we see that's not really true. They get in there and then they want to be on committees and they want different seats and they do want to be careerists. So some of them may have good intentions when they were going in. Some of them may have been handpicked by people. It's just the reality of it, guys. You got to think about this. Any type of, I guess, competition that we had, even when we were growing up. I remember, like, even in high school, student council, even in college, student council. Yeah, there were some people who wanted to get in to do good things, but there were also some people that were handpicked because they were popular and they knew that it would be good to have them in because they were well known because they were popular. So this is just everyday life, and
I'll
I
tell
think
you.
that
Yeah.
we just have to stop falling for it. We have to open our eyes and see what's really going on in front of us. And this is why I tell people, if you are running in the two-party system, if you are running as a part of the duopoly, you too will be corrupted.
No, it's like I got thrown off of my high school student council because I started telling them they need to make some changes at the school and they had to do this and this. And why doesn't the council have a budget? And I got some of the council members to join me. I got all the students to sign petition. It was wonderful. And then they sat me down and said, "We're not making any changes. You got to go."
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's on the high school level.
Yep. They go along with the general consensus. It's like they want you to convince people that you are going to make changes, but they know, and sometimes the candidate knows too ahead of time, that they're not going to do those things. They're not going to fight for those things.
Absolutely. And in regards to, I'll have the video in, oh, I have it now. So in regards to Cynthia McKinney, sorry, my computer is glitching. Give me 1 second here.
Oh, no worries. I understand.
So in regards to Cynthia McKinney, she was actually put on the Green Party ballot in Alaska, along with former Governor Jesse Ventura. I really like that ticket, honestly. But I don't know about you, but I want to play here an ad. Now Jesse didn't end up running with the Green, all that stuff happened, whatever else.
Yeah.
But I want to play this ad and get your reaction to this. This was one of the ones that the Draft Jesse movement put out for Jesse Ventura. This was before he was with Cynthia McKinney, but let me put this out.
And I'll tell you something else, honestly. Before I put my butt on the line, this country better show me it's worth it. We gotta think revolutionary. You gotta be ready to elect Che Guevara. Because I will change things if I won.
We need a single-payer, government-run health care.
It's a human right. If you're sick, you should be able to go to the doctor. If we weren't spending all our money on these wars, we could have health care 3 times over.
Health should not be for profit. Everybody in this country deserves the same health care that congressmen get. They should be no better or no worse than us. After all, don't they work for us?
I would start a war on the climate and a war on pollution. I'm watching the oceans die before my very eyes. I got news for you, ladies and gentlemen. If the oceans die, we die.
The basic 4 years should be free, so we now pay from kindergarten through 4 years of college. We can do that if we get out of the wars. I'll support that. If we guarantee we get out of wars, the result will be free college.
the state of our country today. We're in a mess. And who is to blame? The Democrats and the Republicans. They have been in charge for my entire life. How can we take our country back today? Simple. Stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. We must, this election, elect an independent. Will you agree we're polarized? The worst we've been probably since the Civil War, I would imagine. Well, if you elect a Dem or Repub, the polarization is going to continue. The only way the country's going to get reunited is to elect an independent president.
So then do you feel a need to do it in order to serve your country?
I have that voice in the back of my head that says to me, if not you, then who? It's there. If they got the frickin' guts to let me in a debate, I'll come in and destroy their two candidates and steal the election in November, just like I did in Minnesota.
Ventura being declared the winner. First he was Jesse the Body Ventura, then he was Jesse the Mind, now he's Jesse the Governor.
If the Greens come back to me in the end of July and say, you're my man, if it becomes brokered, I won't shut the door.
So I want to get your immediate reaction to that.
That was an amazing ad that I wish would have been shown across all platforms for everyone to see.
And look, I like Howie Hawkins. He's a nice guy. I met him a couple of times, but he couldn't even get to 1% in the election.
Right. He was not as well known. So advertising has a bit to do with that. Also money though, because you need a lot of money to have commercials, to have some of these ads. Some of these television stations charge you like per minute. These things are very, very expensive. But I really wish people would have seen that ad because it's true. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans, they're in bed together. Like there is no separate bedroom. They're in bed together and they're there to do what their donors, their corporate donors tell them to do.
Absolutely. And they ended up putting him on the ballot in Alaska along with Cynthia McKinney. Yeah, they actually did pretty well there. They, of course, didn't win the state. It's not like he was actually running or anything, or it was a state where he was particularly well known in. Like, I'm sure if they put him on the ballot in Minnesota, where he was governor and mayor many years ago, he would have done better. But yeah, he's an example of what happens, because in 1999, they let him into the debates back when the Women's League of Voters controlled it, before the corporation took over. And guess what happened? He won the election with $350,000 against $14 million from the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah, and this is also why they don't want to let third-party candidates debate. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but when Elizabeth Warren won her last election, it was not just her and Jeff Deal. There was a third-party candidate that they would not let debate. They would not let him come on the debate stage. Now, I don't agree with some of the things that he had on his platform, but the fact that he was suppressed and they prevented him from talking. We just saw this happen with Princess Blanding in Virginia, who's running for governor in Virginia. She got there for the debates and they told her that she couldn't come on the debate stage. They said, talk to the press after. So it is completely rigged for Democrats and Republicans. And if you don't fall under one of those, they will suppress you. They will smear you like they did Jill Stein. They will do everything that they can to prevent your voice from being heard. And this is where independent media comes in. This is where you need people like us, all of us on these platforms, to prop up these candidates. And that means that some of these platforms that have millions of subscribers, that have hundreds and thousands of subscribers, they need to give those candidates a voice. And I want you to pay very close attention when we go into election season. If you see that they are not giving none of those third party candidates a voice, then you know the 9 times out of 10 they are bought and paid for as well.
Absolutely. Now let's start wrapping up. But I wanted to ask you if you're familiar with the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. They do a really good job of this. They held the third party debate for president, and they've been doing it since 2008.
I've heard of it, yeah.
They do a particularly good job of this. They have a new app coming out called the Blockchain Voter App, which lists every single candidate that's running, Democrats, Republicans, and third parties, and lets people vote what they want to do in the next presidential debate. I want to see what you think about this. Is let people, they have their qualifications, but what they want to do is the people who don't meet the qualifications, let the people vote who they want to see in that debate, who has not met their minimum qualifications. So, for example, Mark Charles, I was a really big fan of Mark Charles. I don't know if you paid any attention to Mark Charles. He only made it into one of their debates because he didn't qualify for the regular debates. The people would be able to go into that app and say, we like Mark Charles a lot. Let him debate.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Listen, if the Democratic Party during the primaries for 2020, if they could have 21 candidates and split it up into 2 different nights where 10 are on one stage and 10 are on another stage, and I think the other person didn't make it on, these third party candidates can debate as well.
And everybody forgets the one who, I'm not sure if you're familiar, Mike Gravel was the one they left off the stage. And there's a reason they left him off the stage.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are going to say some, and Tulsi Gabbard and all of them will say some controversial, out of the mainstream things. But Mike Gravel is a whole other animal.
Yes. I know, he was amazing. It would have been great to have him on. I think they realized when he was on the debate stage when Obama was running in 2008, we can't let this guy come back on the stage and talk again.
No, exactly.
But he was telling the truth.
He'll go much further than Bernie Sanders ever did.
Absolutely.
So the last thing is, where can people find you?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can find me on YouTube. My channel is Sabby Sabs. You can also find me on the Fred Hampton Leftist Network for the Sabby Sabs show and the roundtable that we have every week. And you can find me on Twitter at Sabby Sabs 2, as well as Spotify and iHeartRadio.
Wonderful. I'm going to play this out. Hold on.